So, explain, if you would, tartrates.
Tartrates is cream of tartar, or also known as cream of tartar, potassium bitartrate, and it's basically it's a crystal that forms from the major organic acid in wine grapes, tartaric acid, and potassium that is in great supply in wine grapes as well. So over time, these crystals will form from these two things. It's actually tartrates, or potassium bitartrate, is forming all the time after crush. You crush grapes, and now things that have been separate, potassium tends to be sequestered, or at least it's higher in certain tissues, and then the tartaric acid is, in other tissues. When you crush these grapes, now they have a chance to interact, and this solubility of potassium bitartrate, or the tendency to create these crystals, grows as alcohol level goes up. For some reason, alcohol causes this stuff to want to fall out more. So you could have grape juice that, would stick it in a refrigerator. I'll back up a little bit. So alcohol level as alcohol goes up, the solubility of this stuff goes down. Also, as temperature goes down, the solubility goes down. So you drop the temperature of something, it will tend to want to drive this precipitation reaction. Also, you get some fermentation going on, you're getting this reaction happening. So the whole early part of the wine's life, these crystals are being formed. You just don't see it because there's other stuff in there. You have all the skins and seeds and yeast and stuff floating around. Most people really focus on this is after you have a finished wine, either in a tank before it's bottled or in a bottle. What most wineries these days do before they bottle wines, and particularly white wines, is they drop the temperature of the finished wine to refrigerator temperature or lower in order to make this reaction occur before it goes into bottle. And then these crystals will fall onto the bottom of the tank or stick to the sides of the tank. And then the wine is either carefully racked or possibly filtered to a bottling tank and then bottled. Some wines that are not subject to this have a tendency to form those crystals, particularly if they're not lees-aged wines for an extended period. And I think Riesling-type wines, Chenin Blanc, things like that, tend to be bottled sooner. They haven't had the opportunity for this stuff to leak out of yeasts to help buffer this. So anyway, there's sometimes we'll get a bottle of wine that wasn't subjected to very high processing, to very possibly injurious, or at least very cold temperatures in the winery. Then when it gets shipped, let's say it gets left on a dock someplace, and the temperature of the wine in the bottles gets lower than it's ever been before for several days, you can get some of those crystals to form, and this happens to be an example of that. There's a very small amount of crystals in there. Some people might be concerned if they don't know what that is. They might think it's ground glass or some impurity in here, when it's actually just part of the wine ended up precipitating into cream of tartar. I talked to, 20 years ago, I met a young German fellow who was traveling the world, and he wasn't a winemaker or anything, but he was just interested in wine and beer and life. And he told me that actually seeing some of these crystals was a sign of quality in the white wine. It meant that it was made by smaller operation that might have had better or at least site-specific wines, so that there was nothing at all wrong with that in small amounts. I think personally, functionally, I've seen wines that have had so much of these tartrate crystals that when you pull the cork out, the wine won't pour because it's been sort of plugged with this. But that's a very extreme example. We have a bottle here that was just a very tiny little bit. There's nothing at all wrong with that. In fact, I would concur with Heinz Donsberger's opinion that this is a sign of quality rather than something that anybody did wrong, or other than maybe the people at the dock. But that's one reason that people tend to what they call cold stabilize wines. I do that to some degree with my Chardonnay, although it's extended lees aged. I'll put the barrels outside for a couple of nights in the winter when it's fairly cold to drop the temperature somewhat and allow this to happen to some degree. I don't make wines like this, so I don't have to worry about that. However, my dry rosé is not aged on these a terribly long time. And so I'll do the same thing with that, hoping that it's not left in a refrigerator or freezer for too long, because we may get a little bit of those crystals to form. Again, I think that wine that has a tendency to do some of that is not such a bad thing.